Canada continues to wrestle with how best to respond to the threat of 25% tariffs from the U.S. So exactly how do tariffs work and how will they affect our bottom line? Well, today's guest will sort some of this out for us as we're joined by Dr. Danny LeRoy. He is an associate professor of economics at the University of Lethbridge. Welcome, Dr. LeRoy. Great to have you with us today.
It's great to be here, Jeanette. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so this is such a timely topic. Everyone's talking tariffs these days. So why don't we start with a bit of an overall explanation, almost like a Tariffs 101 course. What exactly are tariffs and how do they work, practically speaking?
That's an excellent question. Tariffs are taxes, and they are taxes not on goods, but they're on people. Cigarettes don't pay taxes. Lumber doesn't pay taxes. Aluminum and steel don't pay taxes. Only people can be compelled to pay. So, in this discussion with the consequence of Trump's tariffs, it's important to remember the people involved. And the people who are directly impacted, first and foremost, are those individuals in the United States who wish to buy products produced in Canada. And these are the people who are paying import taxes on those goods. It's individuals who are paying taxes on these imported goods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So go ahead.
And one of the consequences of these taxes being put in place is that it makes it relatively more expensive for consumers in the United States to buy products produced in Canada because they are compelled to pay this import tax.
Right. Yeah.
And a consequence of paying a higher tax and paying higher prices is that they're going to substitute, perhaps, towards things that are relatively less expensive. And that might be something that's produced in the United States. It might be something that's produced not in Canada, not in Mexico, but from somewhere else in the world. So one of the impacts on Canadians and why Canadians should be concerned about this is that to the extent that buyers in the United States substitute away from buying goods produced by Canadians, revenues for sellers in Canada will fall. And these products, Jeanette, they don't vanish, but they will find their next best market, the next best available, capable buyer. And some of those buyers might be in Canada. So, for example, if there's a decrease in the amount of aluminum and steel that is purchased by Americans, and this aluminum and steel is produced in Canada, that there'll be more available for Canadians to purchase. So one of the maybe not intended, but the consequences of this is that these goods that have already been produced will find another market and they will be sold perhaps at a lower price. In the longer term, this is very important for businesses because the revenues that they can make from selling to the buyers in the United States, these are circumscribed, and they can only use their resources in a less profitable and productive way. Now, some of these businesses might decide to produce less. They might decide to hire fewer people, generate less output, and generate smaller revenues. So the reason why these Trump tariffs are of concern to Canadians, it's not that President Trump can tax Canadians. The only people he's capable of harming are his own citizens, the importers in the United States. But it's the response of those importers that has consequences for Canadians.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Well, okay, so when a Canadian company exports a product to the U.S., who pays the tariff? It's the Americans?
It's the Americans who pay the import tax.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And it means that they're if the price in Canada, for example, is $100 US, and the buyer in the United States has to pay a 25% import tax on that, the cost to the buyer in the US becomes $125.
Okay. So who gets the money in all of this?
It's it is collected by the revenue agents in the United States. They're the ones that they're imposing this tax, and they are the ones that collect it.
So
Uh,
when leaders of nations place tariffs on other countries, like Trump is doing, what are they
but
usually?
they're not placing tariffs in other countries. They're placing taxes on their own citizens.
Yeah, but I
Right?
think, do you think that people are confused by this?
I think there is an important misunderstanding
Okay.
here, because Canadians don't pay U.S. import taxes. We suffer the consequences of individuals in the United States having to pay higher taxes, but we ourselves, I don't have to send any money to President Trump.
Right.
It's the citizen in the United States who's paying
Okay. I
these
think
import
that's the
taxes.
confusion. So what are these countries trying to usually accomplish? Is it just to make
Well,
money, or is the end goal to encourage their own citizens to buy local and to create more
well,
jobs this way?
that that's one of the objectives, is to encourage more domestic production. So, for example, on aluminum and steel, the fact that imports from Canada are will be buyers in the United States will be taxed 25% beginning March 12th. This makes it possible for firms who produce aluminum and steel in the United States to raise their prices a little bit. And it encourages other people to expand production and enter these industries. However, one of the consequences of that is that these resources necessary for producing aluminum and steel in the United States have to come from somewhere, right? So they'll be bid away from current lines of production into the production of aluminum and steel, where they don't have a comparative advantage in producing this. They could get it less expensive from suppliers in Quebec.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So when President Trump has said that tariffs will make America rich again, is there any truth to that?
They're Overall, you cannot tax yourself to prosperity. Winston Churchill very famously made a parallel to standing in a bucket and trying to lift yourself up. It just doesn't work, right? You can't tax your way to prosperity. Now, one of the consequences of these tariffs is that it redistributes some of the existing wealth from those individuals who are now paying the taxes to those who benefit from that protection. So it doesn't make America wealthier overall, but the benefits and costs are easily identifiable, and the individuals who benefit and those who must pay are also easily seen.
Yeah. Okay. So it's going to clearly hurt the United States.
It's going to hurt
And
some of the people. It's
yeah.
hurting some of the people, right? We need to remember the people involved. The United States can't hurt anybody, right? It's a geopolitical region. It's individuals, economics and tariffs, and this concerns people. It's who we are. People are being taxed. People are being encouraged to substitute away from products produced by Canadians to products that are produced in the United States. And part of the aim is to expand production of aluminum and steel.
Yeah. And I was just going to mention, so when we see 25% tariffs placed on aluminum for exports from Canada, which account for what, 60% of America's
Yep.
imports? So won't that impact businesses and consumers in America? Like, their costs for aluminum are going to go up, and I'm guessing that they won't be able to build manufacturing plants anywhere fast enough to produce enough
Well,
U.S.
no. Well,
aluminum, right?
the longer the tariff is in place, the more damaging it becomes.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right, Jeanette, that in the short term, these buyers of aluminum and steel, it raises their cost structure. Anybody that's selling pop in cans, or they're using steel for erecting buildings, all of this is going to become more and more expensive in the United States. So it's a great example of how tariffs don't create prosperity. It raises the cost structure of anybody who's buying these imported goods from individuals in Canada.
Yeah. So what is Trump's end game here, in your opinion?
Well, I don't know, but the idea that somehow this is the source of prosperity, and that one can tax their way to affluence is a bit misplaced.
Yeah. If the tariffs were to be kept in place for an extended period of time, is it possible that some American steel producers would simply move their production to another country?
If the tariffs are in place, it's steel producers in other countries that might be have the incentive to move to the United States, because the import tax gives them some protection from insulates them from foreign competition. So one of the things that a tariff does, it brings industries that left the United States because they weren't competitive. Having a tariff in place brings them back. It provides them a larger potential profit, and it encourages, I guess the term would be, reshoring some of these industries. But this comes at a huge cost, and it's net counterproductive.
Hmm. And at present, the Canadian dollar is weak, which makes Canada attractive for investments. But could that have a positive impact in the tariff war?
I'm not so sure what the connection would be there,
Hmm.
in terms of somebody deciding where to invest, whether it's in Canada or in the United States. There's a litany of factors beyond the purchasing power of the currency that would influence an entrepreneur. And among them would be the regulatory framework. It's not just import taxes, but taxes generally, business taxes, one carbon tax. In Canada, there's a long list of things that would cause a potential investor at least a moment of pause.
Right. How long do you think it will take for the American public to start protesting against the higher costs for consumers?
Well, it depends where the import taxes, who pays them, and the number of people who pay them, and how long the consequences are felt, and how deeply they're felt. If there was an import tax put on Canadian oil and gas that's produced in Canada and exported to the United States, if it was at 25%, there would be I think, a big reaction, because everybody's buying fuel. Energy is expensive, and Canadians are an important purveyor of oil and gas to consumers in the United States, and making those goods 25% more expensive than they currently are would impact a lot of people and cascade out just well beyond the price at the pump.
Yeah. Historically, how long do these kinds of tariff wars last? And who ends up being the winners and the losers in the end?
Well, there's no winners in the long term. There's no winners. Um, in the short term, we need to be very careful. You mentioned at the outset of the interview here, what should the response in Canada be?
Hmm.
If in the United States consumers are facing higher taxes on the goods on products that they are importing, these people who are buying imports, if they're taxed at a higher rate, it does nothing to resolve that problem by taxing Canadians. How does taxing somebody or removing or preventing people from buying products resolve the problem?
Yeah.
Right? You know, if you take alcohol off the shelf, if you know that, or you tax some individuals in Canada who wish to buy products produced in the United States, this doesn't solve the problem. We're harming our own citizens by doing this. In fact, the appropriate response would be to recognize how damaging these import taxes are, and then do what we can to remove any impediments that we have. We should be encouraging people to buy more, not only in Canada but from everywhere in the world, to make it as easy as possible for the buyers and sellers to interact, to reduce the costs of transacting. Right, what makes people rich, Jeanette, is it's what they consume. right? And if you make it more expensive to consume things, you don't make people wealthier, you make them poorer.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think it's possible that Trump is simply using the tariff threats as leverage, and perhaps the tariffs will never actually
I,
put into
I
place?
well, there might be something to that. That's a little beyond my professional wheelhouse,
Yeah.
but you see how if one of the things that he has been able to do is that he certainly has Canadian politicians in a twist,
Yeah, sure
right?
does.
And in terms of improving border security, my goodness, he's realized that objective at almost zero cost.
Yes, yeah, it's pretty incredible.
It is so. Rather than harming our own citizens by responding with creating import taxes of our own and enforcing them, right? Why don't we? The appropriate response might be to find ways to remove his ability to lever, right? So if we have some obligations at the border for security, maybe these obligations ought to be fulfilled. If there's import taxes in Canada that impede producers in the United States from satisfying the wants of Canadians, maybe these import taxes on Canadians should be removed, right? Just take that what's the fulcrum point on the lever? Take it away from them. Canada's open for business.
Yeah, exactly. We are unfortunately out of time here. It's such a huge topic, lots to unpack. But Dr. LeRoy, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I enjoyed it very much.
Dr. Danny LeRoy is an associate professor of economics at the University of Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.